The sun bled gold over the Wyoming frontier, casting long shadows across the dusty town of Sable Creek. It was the kind of place where boots thudded louder than words, and the wind carried more secrets than the saloon did whiskey. But even in a land where men kept to themselves and women kept to prayer, a new kind of gossip had caught fire, and it all started with a letter, tacked to the notice board in front of Calhoun's general store, flapping in the wind like a challenge. To the heavens was a handwritten ad in bold, unforgiving ink, looking for a woman of strong will, steady hands, and no illusions, not a wife, an equal. If you can tame my wild stallion, Diablo, the Blackwell Ranch is yours. Fail and ride. Out of town before sundown. Griffin Blackwell. Folks chuckled at it, scoffed at it, or flat out cursed it. A few cowgirls considered it, then reconsidered when they heard what Diablo had done to the last ranch hand who tried to saddle him, broken 3 ribs, dislocated a shoulder, and left the man sobbing in the dirt. A horse like that was either touched by the devil or answering only to one Griffin himself, Griffin. Blackwell wasn't just the richest landowner in the region. He was a man built from iron and silence. Since the death of his wife, he'd spoken more to his cattle than to another soul. Blackwell Ranch sprawled over miles of untamed wilderness, its fences stretching like fingers across the hills. But the heart of it, its soul, was Diablo. And Diablo was unbroken. No one knew why Griffin had issued such an insane dare. Some said it was grief, others pride. Maybe he thought no woman would take it seriously. But he underestimated Clara Monroe. Clara wasn't like the other women who'd read that notice and walked away. She'd seen stallions buck harder than Diablo in her rodeo days before tragedy sent her fleeing the circus lights for something quieter. But quiet never found her. Loss followed, so did whispers. And now she was running again, but this time toward something. She arrived in Sable Creek 3 weeks later. A worn satchel on her shoulder, dust on her boots. No one noticed her at first, just another weary traveler passing through. Until she walked into Calhoun's and asked for directions to the Blackwell Ranch. You mean that place out west with the devil horse? The shopkeeper snorted. You looking for work there, miss? No, Clara said, her voice calm but clear. I'm answering the ad. The store went still. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. By the time Clara reached the ranch, word had spread like wildfire. Griffin was in the stables, tending to Diablo when he saw her approach. His first impression was not what he expected. She wasn't desperate. She wasn't frail. Her eyes, gray like winter steel, met his with something close to defiance. You're late, Griffin grunted. Wasn't a deadline on that ad? She shot back, brushing dust off her sleeves. Unless you changed your mind. He narrowed his eyes. I didn't expect anyone to come, let alone someone like you. Someone like me? She raised an eyebrow. You don't look like you've mucked a stall or thrown a saddle. She smiled. You'd be surprised. Griffin gave her one long, measuring look, then nodded toward the corral. There he is, Diablo. Wildest thing you'll ever meet. Clara turned. Her breath caught. The stallion stood tall and proud, black as night, his mane whipping in the breeze. His eyes burned with fury pure, undiluted. Spirit, most would back away. Clara stepped closer. Is the deal still on? She asked without turning back. Griffin crossed his arms. If you want the ranch, you've got to break him. No tricks, no help. Clara finally looked at him. Then you'd better draw up the papers. I won't take handouts. Something in Griffin's expression shifted, just a flicker, a breath of curiosity. Fine, 1 month. Break him. The land is yours. Fail. He didn't finish the sentence. I know, she said. I leave before sundown. And just like that, the deal was struck. Clara's first night at Blackwell Ranch was filled with silence and stares. The ranch hands watched her like a ghost had moved into the bunkhouse. Even the cook refused to serve her supper unless she sat. In the back, Clara didn't complain. She'd been an outsider before. It didn't bother her until she saw how Diablo was being treated. The stallion was locked up like a monster. No light, no pasture. Just straw, steel, and solitude. Clara sat outside his stable, whispering stories about wide-open plains and other horses she'd loved. Diablo snorted, pawed the ground, and bared his teeth, but he didn't turn away. That was enough for Day. One. Griffin watched from a distance, half expecting her to quit that night. But she didn't. The next morning she was up before dawn, braiding rope and singing softly near the paddock. "She ain't gonna last," muttered one ranch hand. "She ain't like the others," Griffin muttered back. He didn't know how. Right he was. By the end of the first week, Diablo still hadn't let her touch him, but he hadn't attacked her either. Progress in inches. Clara was patient, gentle. She didn't shout, didn't yank. She treated Diablo like a broken heart, not a problem to fix. It frustrated Griffin. He was a man of action, not waiting. But every time he stormed down to the paddock to tell her she was wasting time, she'd say, "You gave me a month, let me use it." One afternoon, thunder rolled over the hills. A storm was coming. Griffin rushed to bring the horses inside, but Diablo spooked, rearing and kicking, bolts of lightning flashing across the darkening sky. Before anyone could react, Clara dashed into the paddock. "Clara!" Griffin shouted. "Are you insane?" She ignored him. The storm raged, but Clara stood her ground. Her voice steady, her presence calm, and Diablo stopped. Just stopped. Griffin couldn't believe his eyes. In the pouring rain, Clara approached the stallion slowly, her hand out. Diablo flared his nostrils and then lowered his head, just enough for her to touch his mane. That night, Griffin poured her a drink and placed it on the porch. She looked at him, surprised. "You celebrating something?" He didn't smile. "Just," said. "You made it farther than anyone else." She nodded. "Thanks, but I'm not done yet." He studied her as she sipped the whiskey mud on her boots, rain in her hair, pride in her bones. For the first time in years, Griffin Blackwell wasn't thinking about the past. He was thinking about her. And wondering, for the first time, if this dare of his wasn't a test for a horse, but for himself. The Wyoming morning opened with a whisper of frost on the grass, dew clinging like pearls to the barbed wire fences. Clara Monroe was up before dawn, standing near the corral, her breath steaming in the cold. She watched Diablo pacing like a caged panther, his black coat gleaming in the rising sun. He was restless, more so than usual, as if the earth beneath him warned of an oncoming shift. She could feel it too, tension in the air. A storm was coming. Not just from the sky, but from something deeper. It had been 10 days since her arrival. 10 days of coaxing, observing, and patience. The ranch hands had stopped betting on how soon she'd fail. Now they were betting on how close she'd come before Diablo broke her. Griffin Blackwell, true to his nature, kept his distance. But every morning, Clara could feel his eyes on her from the porch or the shadows of the barn. He never interfered. He never advised. He just watched, and that silence was both a burden and a comfort. Clara stood at the fence and began her ritual. She hummed an old melody, an Appalachian lullaby her mother used to sing when the nights were long and the wolves howled closer. Diablo stopped pacing and turned toward her, ears twitching. Progress. She reached for the gate, opening it slow. "No sudden moves. You and me," she whispered. "We've got a dance to finish." She stepped into the paddock. Diablo didn't bolt, didn't charge, he just watched. Clara's boots sank into the soft dirt as she approached, one step at a time. No ropes, no saddle. Just her and the beast. She reached out her hand. Diablo flinched. "Easy," she murmured. The wind kicked up. Overhead, clouds were gathering, heavy, angry. She'd seen storms like this before, the kind that didn't just soak the land, but tore through it like judgment. But her eyes were on Diablo. For a long moment, he stood still. Then, with a sudden huff, he turned his head and let her fingers brush his neck. Contact. She exhaled softly. Inside, her heart thumped like thunder. But she didn't move, didn't press her luck. Good boy, she whispered. From the porch, Griffin clenched the railing tighter. His jaw worked. He didn't know whether to feel relief or something else entirely, envy. Maybe, for how easily she connected with something so wild. That afternoon, Clara brushed Diablo for the first time. He didn't like it, snorted, pawed the ground, but he didn't attack. Every motion was slow, respectful, like she was greeting an old spirit rather than taming a creature. You treat him like a man, not a horse, Griffin finally said, startling her. Clara turned, brush still in hand. He's got more pride than most men I've met. Griffin approached the fence, arms crossed. His hat shaded his eyes, but his voice was curious. You ever been thrown? Plenty. Scared? Of what? She asked. He nodded toward Diablo. Of him snapping one day. Clara looked back at the stallion. He's already snapped. I'm just trying to piece together what's left. That night the wind howled louder. Thunder rolled across the plains, rattling the shutters. Diablo grew restless, stomping and neighing. The sky crackled with heat lightning. The ranch hands shut their windows. Horses were brought into the barn except for Diablo. He wouldn't go. Clara threw on her coat and stomped out into the storm. Where the hell do you think you're going? Griffin called from the porch. To him. He'll kill you, he warned. She didn't answer. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the paddock. Diablo was wild-eyed, jerking against the corral fence, breath steaming in terror. He remembered. Storms. Clara could see it in his stance, panic, rooted deep. She climbed into the paddock, soaked within seconds. Clara! Griffin shouted, racing toward her. I'm fine. She yelled, pushing her hair back. Let me do this. He stopped at the fence, his fists clenched, fighting every instinct to drag her out. Clara stepped toward the stallion. Wind whipped at her clothes. Her boots squelched in the mud. I'm here. She called out, voice loud but soft, strong but sure. Diablo bucked. Lightning flashed. But she didn't flinch. Listen to me, boy. I'm not leaving you to scream in the dark. She reached him barely. Her hand brushed his neck again, calming him for just a heartbeat before thunder crashed above them. Diablo reared. Clara didn't run. She pressed her hand to his side, leaning in. I know what it means to be alone in a storm, she said softly. I know what it means to lose everything and not know who to trust. The stallion's chest heaved. Then slowly his body began to still. He lowered his head and rested it gently against her shoulder. From the fence, Griffin could hardly breathe. Clara stroked Diablo's mane as the rain poured down around them. For the first time since the accident that took Griffin's wife, since Diablo turned wild, someone had reached him. That night, Clara sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, soaked to the bone. Griffin brought her coffee. He didn't say anything, just sat beside her. I don't do this for show, she said. I know. You think I'm gonna win? I didn't think anyone would make it this far. Clara stared into the dark. Neither did I. A silence settled between them, not awkward, but thick with something new. Respect. Maybe something more. Griffin looked at her, his voice low. He let you touch him. Yeah, I saw. She sipped the coffee. He was scared. So? Were you? She didn't deny it. Griffin stood, watching the rain ease into drizzle. You saved him from the storm, he said. Clara looked up. I didn't save him. I just stood still long enough for him to know I wasn't like the others. Griffin stared into the dark and nodded slowly. Maybe that's what he needed too, someone who wouldn't flinch when things turned ugly. The sun returned the next morning, soft and apologetic after the night storm. The ranch was quiet, the kind of quiet that held its breath. But Clara Monroe felt something new in the air trust. Not from the people, no. The ranch hand still glanced sideways, still muttered behind her back. But from him, from Diablo, there was now a sliver of understanding. He let her brush him without flinching. He no longer jerked away when she entered the corral. They were building something, invisible but solid, one morning at a time. Even Griffin Blackwell, ever silent and guarded, had shifted. He lingered nearby now, not interfering, not judging, just there. As if watching her heal, the stallion was helping him stitch together his own unraveling threads. For the first time, Clara began to feel something she hadn't dared hope for. In years of future. But futures don't grow well in soil where the past still festers. It started with the distant rumble of hooves. A horse kicked up dust across the horizon. A lone rider headed toward Blackwell Ranch. Clara shielded her eyes, frowning. Something about the rider made her stomach twist. Griffin stepped out from the barn, jaw tight. "Friend of yours?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not mine." The rider dismounted clumsily, boots landing heavily. His coat was filthy, his breath thick with whiskey. A crooked grin spread across his face as he looked Clara up and down. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, loud and slurred. "Little Clara Monroe. Didn't think you'd crawl out from under that rock." Her spine stiffened. "Leave, Garth," she said sharply. "You're not welcome here." "Oh, come on," he sneered, turning to Griffin. "You must be the big man with the ranch and the death wish. Did she tell you who she really is? Did she tell you about the rodeo?" Griffin looked between them, his brow furrowing. Clara stepped forward, fists clenched. "Get off this land, Nell." But Garth wasn't done. "She didn't tell you how she used to stand on galloping horses in a touring circus, dressed like a whore and smiling for drunks? Or about the time her stupid stunt killed a horse? Killed a boy too, didn't it?" Griffin's expression hardened, but he said nothing. Clara's face paled. "I said go," she said, voice trembling. "Don't worry." Garth grinned. "I just came to see how far the mighty have fallen. A mail-order bride trying to win a ranch? Hell of a joke." Before anyone could stop him, he spat on the ground near Diablo's paddock and turned back to his horse. "I'll be in town, sweetheart," he called as he mounted. "If you feel like owning up to who you really are." Then he rode off, leaving a trail of venom in his wake. Clara stood frozen, hands shaking. Griffin was silent for a moment. Then, "Is it true?" Clara turned away. "Clara." She finally faced him, jaw tight. "Yes, I was in a traveling show. I rode bareback, did stunts, wore feathers. I made people clap, and one day I pushed too hard. A horse stumbled. The boy riding with me didn't make it. His name was Eli. He was just 13. Her voice cracked, but she held herself upright. "I left. I couldn't bear the noise of the crowd after that. I couldn't bear the silence either. I just left." Griffin watched her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I've lost someone too," he said. "I know," she whispered. He turned and walked away, back stiff. Not angry, not cruel, but distant again. That night, Clara didn't eat. She sat on the porch, Diablo's stable flickering with lantern light in the distance. She watched the stars and thought of Eli's face, young, trusting, fearless. "Told you we were alike, didn't I?" she whispered. "You lost someone too." She didn't know if she was talking to Diablo or Griffin anymore. The next few days were cold again. Not in weather, but in spirit. Griffin barely spoke. The ranch. Hands avoided her like she carried a plague. Garth's rumors had spread fast. Horse killer, they whispered. Blood on her hands. Clara kept to herself. She worked with Diablo, quieter than before. The stallion, sensing her sorrow, became gentler too. One morning he nuzzled her. Arm. She didn't cry, but her fingers lingered on his muzzle like it was the only place she belonged. Then came the day Griffin spoke. It was just before sunset. He rode up beside the paddock, dismounted, and leaned on the fence. He was my wife's horse, you know, he said. Clara looked up. Diablo. She raised him from a foal. He was gentle once. Then the accident happened. Wagon flipped. She was pinned. Diablo tried to pull her out, but it was too late. He blamed himself. Clara listened, heart aching, and so did I. He looked at her. I watched you. With him, with Garth, with the truth. You didn't lie. You didn't hide. You stood tall. Clara said nothing. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. I didn't come here to earn your respect, she said quietly. I came to earn a future. Griffin nodded. Then, keep going. Diablo trusts you. That means something. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't affection, but it was a beginning. That night, Clara dreamed of Eli for the first time in years. He wasn't angry. He was riding, wild and free, across the open plains, and at his side a black stallion thundered like the wind. The dawn rose over Blackwell Ranch with a golden haze that spilled across the valley like a secret the sky could no longer keep. The storm had passed, the gossip had faded, and Garth was gone, run out of town by Griffin himself, though no one spoke of the fists or the bruised ribs. But Clara stayed. She still carried the past in her bones, but it no longer weighed her down like chains. Every morning, she rose before the sun and made her way to Diablo's paddock with a quiet strength that had grown like a wildflower through stone. Diablo was different now. He didn't snort when she approached. He didn't toss his head or rear at her voice. Instead, he stepped forward, sometimes brushing his muzzle against her sleeve, other times standing quietly as she whispered her stories. Griffin noticed. From his place on the hill, just outside the barn, he watched Clara work with the stallion day after day. Her hands were firm but never forceful. Her tone was steady but never loud. She understood Diablo in a way no one else had, not even his late wife, and for the first time since grief swallowed him whole, Griffin felt something bloom inside his chest. Something dangerous. Something fragile. Hope. Clara had waited long enough. It was the 14th day since the storm, and the bond between her and Diablo had grown into something sacred. That morning, after feeding him a few apples and running her fingers down his thick mane, she whispered, "It's time, boy." She led him into the round pen, a place meant for breaking, but Clara didn't believe in that word. You didn't break a soul like his. You asked permission. You earned trust. Griffin stood at the fence, arms crossed, his usual silence louder than any words. The ranch hands gathered at a distance, some curious, others doubting, but none dared laugh any more. Clara set the saddle on the railing. She wasn't rushing. She let Diablo see it, smell it. She let him walk away and come back. She didn't chase. She didn't demand. It took an hour, but eventually he stood still and let her lay the blanket across his back. A collective breath held. Then came the saddle. She moved slow, hands firm and sure, murmuring under her breath, "It's just you and me now. We got nothing to prove to anyone but each other." When the saddle settled and the straps were tightened, Diablo didn't bolt. His muscles tensed, but his eyes stayed on her. Clara gently patted his flank. Griffin's hand gripped the fence so tight, his knuckles turned white. Then Clara climbed the fence, paused, and swung her leg over the saddle. For a heartbeat, Diablo didn't move. Then he exploded. He bucked high, dust flying from the pen in clouds. Clara held tight, her body moving with him like she'd been born in the saddle. Her knees flexed, her hands never jerked the reins, her voice calm even as the stallion reared again and again. "Easy, boy. I'm not here to hurt you." Griffin's heart thundered in his chest. He wanted to leap into that pen and pull her down, shield her from being thrown, but he knew better. Diablo needed this. Clara needed this. Maybe even he did too. The bucking slowed. Diablo was drenched in sweat, sides heaving, but his movements grew less panicked. Clara loosened her grip. She let the reins slacken. She sat tall. And then they walked. One slow circle around the pen. Then another silence fell over the ranch like snowfall. Griffin exhaled. He hadn't realized he was holding his breath. Clara smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "That's it," she whispered. "That's my boy." She dismounted slowly, both boots hitting the earth with the softest thud. The moment her feet landed, the ranch erupted into claps and cheers. Hands patted each other's backs. One even tipped his hat in quiet respect, but Clara didn't hear them. Her eyes were on Griffin, and his were on her. That evening, Griffin found her near the stable, brushing Diablo's mane in the fading sunlight. He didn't speak right away, just watched her with that unreadable look of his. "You did it," he said at last. "No," Clara replied softly. "We did it." Griffin stepped closer, his voice rough. "He trusts you. That's more than anyone else has managed." Clara shrugged. He just needed someone to listen, someone to see him. Griffin's voice dropped to a near whisper. "I see you." Clara froze, brush pausing mid-stroke. Griffin continued, "You came here with nothing but grit and a saddlebag. No lies, no pretenses. You faced that horse, this land, even your past, without flinching." "I wasn't trying to impress anyone," she said. "I know," he replied. "That's what makes it real." They stood in silence, Diablo munching hay behind them. Finally, Griffin reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. "The deed," he said. "Signed and notarized." Clara looked at it, stunned. "It's yours." "Just like we agreed." But she didn't reach for it. "You giving me the ranch now?" she asked, tilting her head. "Just like that?" Griffin nodded. "You earned it." Clara took the paper, but she didn't pocket it. Instead, she stared at it for a long while, then slowly tore it clean down the center. Griffin's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" She handed him half. "You keep this." "What?" "You were right," she said. "I came here looking for something. Thought it was land. But I think maybe it's home." Griffin stared at her. "I don't want a prize," she whispered. "I want a partner." The golden light bathed her features. Griffin stepped forward, hesitating only once before reaching out and gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "I haven't felt anything real in a long time," he said. "Well," Clara smiled, "you're looking at real." Their eyes locked. Griffin leaned in. She didn't pull away. The first kiss was soft, sure, like two storms finally passing. Diablo snorted, stamping one hoof in what might have been approval. When the kiss broke, Clara laughed softly. "That horse is jealous." Griffin grinned. For the first time in years, let him be. The night deepened. The stars came out. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes howled and cattle murmured in their pens. And in the quiet heart of Blackwell Ranch, something new had begun. Not just a partnership, but the slow, powerful rise of love. The days that followed Clara's first ride on Diablo were like something out of a forgotten dream. Clear skies, soft laughter, and quiet understanding. She and Griffin shared early morning coffee on the porch, the smell of roasted beans mingling with the scent of the prairie. Sometimes they didn't speak at all, just sat together and listened to the ranch wake up. The hands who once doubted her now nodded respectfully. Some even asked for help with their own horses, as if Clara carried a piece of whatever miracle had tamed Diablo in her fingers. Diablo, for his part, was thriving. He ran freely now, his gallop no longer a scream of pain but a song of power. When Clara whistled, he came to her, proud and bold. The other horses in the stable seemed to follow his lead, calmer, easier to guide. It was as if the ranch itself had taken a breath and let go of something it had been holding far too long, but storms don't always announce themselves in thunder. Sometimes they come on quiet boots with polite smiles. Clara first noticed the change in the way Griffin tensed one afternoon when a man in a fine coat rode into the ranch yard. The man dismounted with an easy grace and a practiced grin. His boots were polished. His eyes too alert. James Driscoll, he introduced himself, holding out a hand. Neighbor, not far from the canyon edge. Griffin didn't shake it. We're not neighbors, he said coolly. You lease land from the bank and send your ranch hands to poach my cattle. Driscoll's smile tightened. Now. Let's not dig up old bones. I came to talk business. Clara stood beside Diablo, brushing his neck, pretending not to. Listen, I heard about your arrangement, Driscoll continued, nodding at her. Quite the spectacle. Riding that demon horse of yours. Mighty impressive. What do you want, Driscoll? Griffin growled. I want what everyone wants. Opportunity. And rumor has it, you're about to hand over your whole estate to a mail-order bride. Griffin stepped forward. What I do with my ranch is my concern. Driscoll turned to Clara. You trained him. I'll give you double whatever Griffin offered. Come work for me. You could break my horses, teach my hands. You'd have a home. A job, real stability. Clara shook her head. I already have that. You have a gamble, Driscoll said, eyes narrowing. And the kind of man who can turn cold fast when things don't go his way. She stared at him. Is that a threat? No, Driscoll said. Just an observation. Then he tipped his hat and rode off. That night, Clara and Griffin argued. For the first time, he'll cause trouble, Clara warned. You should do something. I've dealt with men like Driscoll before, Griffin said, pouring himself a drink. You said yourself he's been poaching cattle. I said I'd handle it, Clara frowned. I don't want this ranch dragged into some feud because of me. Griffin turned, his voice sharp. It's not because of you. She took a step back, wounded. I just mean, he softened, I've been fighting these battles long before you got here. But I'm here now, she said, and that means something. Griffin ran a hand through his hair, weary. I don't want you in the crossfire. And I don't want to be hidden away like a secret, Clara replied. The air between them grew tense, silent, and cold. In the days that followed, Clara focused on Diablo, trying to shake the feeling of eyes watching her. She checked gates twice, kept the tack room locked, and warned the stable boys not to wander after dark. Then one morning, Diablo was gone. The paddock gate hung open. His hoof prints vanished at the edge of the woods. Panic hit like a hammer. Griffin called for the ranch hands to mount up. Clara was already on a horse, her heart thudding like thunder. They followed the tracks for miles. The trail led into the Chiu. Rocky hills, treacherous and narrow. Griffin cursed under his breath, fury simmering in his jaw. Clara didn't speak. Her eyes were fixed ahead, searching for any sign of him. Then, a scream. From over the ridge, Clara's horse reared. She kicked it forward, ignoring Griffin's shout behind her. She found Diablo tangled in barbed wire, bleeding from his shoulder. And beside him, Driscoll's ranch hand laughing. Holding a rope without thinking, Clara leapt from her saddle and tackled the man to the ground. You tried to steal him, she shouted. He shoved her off, tried to run. Griffin arrived just in time, tackled the man again, and this time he didn't get up, But the damage was done. Diablo was panicked. His flank kicked out, catching Clara in the ribs. She went flying, landing hard on the rocks. She couldn't breathe. Griffin dropped beside her, face pale. "Clara!" She gasped, pain exploding through her side. "I'm okay," she lied. "You're not." "Damn it, you're not." The ranch hands arrived minutes later. Diablo was calmed, the rustler tied up, but Clara couldn't stand. Griffin carried her himself, cradled her in his arms like glass. Back at the ranch, the doctor arrived, set her ribs, and ordered strict rest. "She needs weeks," he said. "No. Horses, no lifting, no riding," Clara protested. "I'm not done." "I still have to." "Clara," Griffin cut in. "You already proved everything." She looked at him from the bed, pain in her eyes. "Then why does it feel unfinished?" He knelt beside her. "Because you've never let yourself rest." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm scared, Griffin." "Of what?" "Of letting someone care for me. Of not being the one always fixing something. Of needing help." He reached up, gently brushing hair from her face. "You're not alone anymore." The next days were slow. Clara stayed in bed. Griffin never left her side. He brought soup. He read aloud from an old book of prairie poems. He even brushed Diablo himself badly, but he tried. Clara watched him one day through the window, and her heart clenched. Not from pain, but from something deeper. Love, not the wild, reckless kind she'd once known, but a quiet, enduring thing. A fire that never had to roar to stay warm. Driscoll was arrested. His rustler confessed everything. The sheriff warned him, "One more toe out of line and you'll lose what's left of your land." The ranch returned to peace. Clara healed slowly. The bruises faded. The bones mended, but something stronger had taken root, not just between her and Griffin, but between her and the land, between her and Diablo, and between the broken parts of herself that, for the first time, began to knit whole again. The sun rose slow and soft over Blackwell Ranch, spilling gold across the fields like the heavens had opened. A breeze carried the scent of prairie grass and dust, swirling around the big corral at the center of the ranch where half the county had gathered. Wagons lined the fence. Boots scraped gravel. Murmurs spread like fire. They had come to witness something no one believed possible. Clara Monroe, ribs still bound, shoulders still sore, hair tied back in a ribbon the color of fire, stood at the edge of the corral. Her eyes were locked on Diablo. The stallion stood, tall in the center, wild mane whipping in the breeze, nostrils flaring. He wasn't saddled. He wasn't roped. He was free and waiting. The beast had chosen her, and now she had to choose to believe in him. Sheriff Dunn leaned on the post. "You sure she's up for this?" Griffin Blackwell didn't answer. He only nodded once. His eyes hadn't left Clara all morning. Clara stepped forward. The crowd hushed. Diablo turned, ears twitching. She raised a hand, palm open, fingers trembling only slightly. Every step she took was a vow to herself, to the horse, to Griffin. "I ain't doing this for applause," she whispered under her breath. "And I ain't doing it for your ranch, Griffin. I'm doing this because I need to finish something that started long before I ever laid eyes on you." She reached Diablo. His eyes locked with hers. There was no fear, only understanding. She touched his neck. No flinch. She moved slow, real slow, lifting the blanket, then the saddle. Diablo shifted his weight but didn't bolt. It was like he'd been waiting for this moment. In the stands, kids gasped. Old-timers removed their hats. Griffin clenched his fists behind his back, and then Clara mounted. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Diablo's muscles tensed. His hooves dug into the dirt. Then, with a scream that cut through the wind, he bolted. Clara leaned forward, legs steady, hands firm but gentle on the reins. Dust flew behind them as they shot across the corral like a bullet. Diablo bucked once. Twice, Clara held. She didn't fight him. She flowed with him. She didn't demand control. She invited it. They moved like storm and lightning, one and the same. Cheers rose. Some cried. Others stood in silence. Stunned out, she took him into a spin, reined him into a gallop, and at the far fence, Clara did something no one expected. She stood in the saddle, arms wide, hair flying, eyes closed like a ghost rider from legend. Diablo didn't flinch. He carried her like she was part of him. When they returned to the center, Diablo slowed. Clara slid off with grace, landing on the ground like a feather. The corral erupted into applause, but Clara didn't smile. She didn't wave. She walked. Straight to Griffin, took the deed from his hand, the one he'd brought just in case, and held it up. "I earned this," she said, loud enough for the whole town to hear. Griffin nodded, pride in his eyes. "You sure as hell did." And then Clara did something that made every jaw drop. She tore the deed in half fluttered to the ground like a feather. She handed the other half to Griffin. "I don't want your ranch," she said softly. "I want our home. If you'll build it with me." For the first time in years, Griffin Blackwell smiled like a man reborn. He took the paper from her hand. "You've tamed more than that stallion, Clara. You've tamed me too." Gasps, chuckles, a few cheers rose again. Then Griffin dropped to one knee. Dust swirled around him. "Clara Monroe," he said, voice low and rough, "I dared you once. Now I ask you, will you marry me? Not as payment. Not as a prize, but as my partner, my equal, my damn miracle." Clara's eyes welled. Diablo walked over and nudged her gently, like he was giving his blessing. Clara looked out at the crowd, then back at the man before her. "Yes," she whispered, "but you have to promise me something. Anything. No more dares." He grinned. "Only dreams." They kissed then, slow and real. And the crowd roared as the sun dipped behind the mountains. Diablo reared behind them, his cry echoing into the golden sky, wild no more, but never tamed. And thus a new chapter began. At Blackwell Ranch, not won, not bought, but built, hoof by hoof, heart by heart. The end.